And good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joey Chen. Up to this point, the threat of the rebel ISIL fighters has been focused on whether the group's campaign would split Iraq. But a declaration and a name change from its leaders has made the force's broader ambitions clear. What is now the former ISIL announced what it calls the formation of the Islamic State, with promises to redraw the map of the Middle East, even as the Baghdad government struggles to take back ground with increasing help from the United States and Russia. We get insight now from America Tonight's Sheila McVicker.
In the Syrian town of Raqqa, automatic weapons fire, guns raised in celebration. This is the stronghold of the group that until today was called ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. But with their rapid advance across Syria's border into Iraq, seizing towns and assets, ISIL has now unilaterally declared an Islamic State and says they will now not only fight to hold the territory they have seized, but pay salaries and collect taxes too.
Inshallah, we are above all other flags of shirk and kufr, inshallah. There's no nationality, we are Muslims, there's only one country. Inshallah, we will also have only one imam, only one khalifa, inshallah.
They announced their intentions in a video, and to make sure the message reaches the widest possible audience, released it in English, Arabic, Russian, French, and German. On their Twitter account, they named the Caliph, the leader of the Islamic State, as Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIL.
He's the breaker of barriers. Inshallah, we'll break the barrier of Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, all the countries, inshallah, until we reach Quds, inshallah. It's the first barriers of many barriers we will break, inshallah.
The idea of a caliphate, a pan-Islamic state, reaches back in time to the Ottoman Empire, rising from Turkey in the 14th century. At its height, straddling North Africa, Egypt, the Middle East, and parts of Europe. No borders, all ruled by the Ottoman Caliph. Brought to an end after World War I with the Treaty of Versailles, imposing borders and colonial spheres of influence. The familiar map of the modern Middle East. Broken apart, says IS, with their capture of border crossings and land on both sides.
Inshallah, we cross the border. And we see that, alhamdulillah, there used to be the Safawi army used to stand here. They used to stand here. This is the so-called border where the police and the people used to pass. Alhamdulillah, there's nobody now except the soldiers of Dawlat al-Islam.
Iraq's military is now fighting back, struggling to regain the city of Tikrit, the hometown of dictator Saddam Hussein, a place where IS has the support and manpower of former Baathists and Sunni tribes, who have not yet reacted publicly to the declaration.
Sheila McVicker rejoining us now. Sheila, let's talk a little bit more about this Islamic State and what it means. Is this something that even the formerly ISIL allies will go along with, or is it too far?
Well, here's the thing. We don't know yet if ISIL, now the Islamic State, consulted with its allies, the Sunni tribes, former Baathists allied to Saddam Hussein, secular Baathists, it has to be said. If they had that conversation and everybody said, all right, we're on board with this, then the situation is somewhat different than if IS, the Islamic State, has now made a unilateral declaration, which is not going to be supported by these other parties. There have already been instances in Mosul and other places where factions allied to the Islamic State have gotten into battles with them. Now, that could happen again. It may also be the beginning where we see the Sunni tribes and the former Baathists pushing IS, the Islamic State, out.
And even if it is the Islamic State, that is not inclusive of all Muslims.
No, it is not. This is very much a Sunni, Salafist, fundamentalist, and brutal regime. We know that they have been accused of war crimes in Syria. They have been accused by the United Nations and others of war crimes in Iraq in the short period of time that they have been there, the executions of Shia prisoners and others. This is not an inclusive state, no matter how much they might want to bring back the notion of the Islamic Caliphate. That is not what this is.
And of course, then the differences will remain with Baghdad and the government, which, by the way, is seating a new parliament this week, or intends to.
That is supposed to happen tomorrow. Again, you've got Nouri al-Maliki, the prime minister-elect, a Shia, trying to form a coalition. He is under tremendous pressure, not just from the Americans, who have made it very clear that they would like him to go, but from others within his own faction. So there's a lot of horse trading going on. The Sunni tribes have made very clear that they will not support a central government in Baghdad as long as Nouri al-Maliki is at its head.
America Tonight, Sheila McVicker, thanks so much. And joining us now is retired General Mark Kimmett. He served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, and he is in fact just returned from a trip to Iraq yourself. Correct. Now we are hearing, we've heard so many voices while you're away talking about Maliki must go. As the parliament is formed here, what are you hearing on the ground happening?
Well, I think we're hearing the same thing, that all of the concerns inside of Iraq seem to be focused on Nouri al-Maliki, but truly he shouldn't be held to blame for everything. Parliament, to a great extent, bears some of the blame as well.
So is there an option coming to fore if that is the case?
Well, we'll see. There's certainly a lot of political horse trading going on tonight in Baghdad. I think we will see tomorrow whether a government will be seated, whether the Sunnis will still boycott. If a government is seated and there is a Sunni boycott, will it be declared illegitimate? This has a long way to go. Yeah,
so it isn't necessarily true that we will see a parliament seated or Mr. Maliki named here. Let's talk about this Islamic State. Sheila has given us some background on what this is about, but let's try to understand that what the Islamic State represents to the United States. There has been this question about whether that would be a harbor for terrorists.
Oh, it certainly would be, and this is classic al-Qaeda by another name. Al-Qaeda has always sought sanctuary and safe haven in ungoverned spaces from which they can set up training areas and, frankly, project power around the world. That's what they're trying to do here. They've done it before in Afghanistan, they've done it before in South Sudan, and that would be an existential threat not only to the region, but Western Europe and in particular the United States. They're declared enemy.
Does it represent any change in what ISIL or the former ISIL is reaching for, its aims?
Well, it's certainly the next step. ISIL is a fighting force. The Islamic State is geography. It's a geographical area, Daesh or Sham, and it's an area where they will set up their own government, set up their own taxation, and set up their own Sharia law.
And what does it represent to the rest of the region?
It's a tremendous concern of the monarchies in the region. It offers an alternative vision to the Sunni countries and the Sunni population in the region. And I would say that the people most concerned about the establishment of the Islamic State are our allies in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and elsewhere.
So it's a bigger concern than simply moving forward toward Baghdad.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is a threat not simply to Iraq, not simply to Syria, but it is a threat to the region and well beyond the region.
The latest that we've heard just today is that the United States is stepping up its forces. We started out with a couple hundred. Now we're looking at a total of about 750 U.S. forces on the ground.
My sensing is that what we're doing is bulking up the security presence at the embassy and some of the other key locations inside of Iraq. I don't necessarily believe that we're going to be seeing those troops acting as advisors, direct advisors to the Iraqi security forces. They're more for force protection than they are for advice and mentoring of the Iraqi security forces.
Does it represent anything about the U.S. heading into a broader role in what's happening in Iraq?
Reluctantly, I believe this president is being pulled into a larger role, not only for the safety of his diplomatic personnel on the ground, but also to ensure that there is some sense of stability inside the country.
General Mark Kimmett, thanks very much. Appreciate your being here at this hour.